Hi, I'm Wendy, the founder of Dresser Up Vintage Boutique and Restorations, and this is Wendy's Workshop. And we are doing our first tutorial. We're going to share with you DIY kits that we're going to be doing monthly. We're going to show you not only what's in the kit, but how to use it. I want to share with you what is going to be included in our first DIY kit. It is going to be this flower pot. Customized flower pot with Iron Orchid design molds on it. It'll also include the tray. We are going to provide paint. There'll be 3 colors of fusion mineral paint. There's going to be a brush in there. We're going to provide cornstarch and an IOD mold with the Iron Orchid design air dry clay. What you'll need is also to have a paper plate to put your paints on and some glue that will allow you to attach the mold to the flower pot. Okay, let's talk about the products that we're going to use in a little bit more detail. The first thing that we're going to use is the Fusion Mineral Paint. This color is Casement. Fusion Mineral Paint is great to be used on furniture as well as for your DIY projects, but it is great on furniture because it is stain-proof and water resistant and does not require a top coat on anything that you're painting. Then we're going to use the Upper Canada and the Bayberry to give you some textured look, which is great. So we're going to layer the paints onto the customized flower pot. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to put a little bit of the cornstarch into the mold, the Iron Orchid design mold, and that will allow the air dry clay to release more readily. So you'll grab a little bit of your Iron Orchid design air dry clay and place it into the mold after you've placed some cornstarch in there. You'll level it off, and there's really great little grids here that allow you to kind of get a really smooth finish to your mold. So you'll pop that out because molds are silicone based, so they're very flexible. They're also food safe. So you can use them for chocolate if you're making candies or something like that. But the air dry clay is what we'll be using for this project. The other thing that after you've released your mold from the silicone, or your clay from the silicone mold, you'll be able to glue it onto the customized pot that you've painted. I use the Type Bond. You can use other glues if you want to. Some people use it's called E6000, but that does have an odor to it, so we tend not to use that in a class setting. But then you'll just glue it on and mold it to the curve of the flower pot. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to be working with our Fusion Mineral Paints to create that kind of mossy look on our custom pot. Now, this can be done different ways, but I typically will use one brush and just keep dipping it into the different colors they want to do and just keep layering the paint until I have the look that I want. So I'm just going to jump in. I've already started with the base coat of white. It's typically what I do. You can start with a darker color if you want to, but we're just going to go with the white for now and start getting that layered look. So I'm going to start with a little bit of the Upper Canada on one side and a little bit of the Bayberry on the other side. Okay, so we're starting to give our custom flower pot a look that is a little bit layered with the different colors. So again, it's Upper Canada and Bayberry on the base of the white. And I'm just going to kind of give it that crisscross textured look. Now this does dry really fast, so some colors are going to start to blend and give us a little bit of a variation of color. But I have quite a bit of paint on here, so I don't need to re-dip right this second, because I do want these colors to dry as we're doing it. So I'm going here now. Here I have a little bit more of the Upper Canada, so I'm going to use the edge that has some Bayberry in it, which is my darker color. And I'm just going to continue to kind of just play around and give it some different patterns here, the crisscross. So it looks like the color that's predominantly coming through is my lighter color. Now I am going to get the edges, and I will go down into the pot a little bit. I'm not going to do that right now just because it might be a little bit messier. Most of that inside of that pot is going to be covered up, so you really don't need to worry about it. So I'm going to go ahead and finish up a little bit here. We're going to set this to the side. I'm going to add a little bit more of the Bayberry, I think. And there is no science. This is not rocket science. It's really just kind of working at it until you get the look that you like. Now at the end, what we're going to do is we're going to do some stippling of the paint onto it to give it kind of that look that you might see a waterline that has come through the terracotta pot. So we're going to set this aside right now and kind of let that dry a little bit. Okay, so we have the flower pot done, set aside to dry, and we're going to do the tray, the base. And I've, again, dipped it into the bayberry and into the Upper Canada color. And again, I'm just going to use that cross-hatching pattern, just crisscross them. And you can kind of see just getting some variations of color. And then I might come back with darker or lighter, just depending on what I would like that pot to look like. And I'm just going to keep just adding and crisscrossing. Now, it does dry pretty fast, but we're going to do a little bit of cheating, and you can do this at home too. A lot of times in our workshops, we use a hair dryer and just dry the paint a little bit quicker so that you can move on to the second step. So if you have a hair dryer handy, grab that, apply a little bit of heat, and you'll be ready for that next coat. Now, sometimes I'll just do 2 coats, sometimes 1, but sometimes I just keep playing around with it because I'm having fun. So, and there you go. So there's my second part. And if you look, this one has a lot more of the bayberry in there, so you're seeing definitely a darker look to it, which I like. I think that tends to look more like the dark moss that you get. So when we come back on this one, I might add more bayberry than I do the Upper Canada. Hi, we're moving on to part 2 of our custom flower pot with the Iron Orchid Design molds. So this is our Iron Orchid Design mold that we're going to be using and including in the kit. And we're going to start with these 2 right here and then probably put a crown in the middle. So what you want to do to start this out is you want to add a little cornstarch. I like to use a tool because I do not, and most of you probably don't either, like the feel of the cornstarch. It's kind of a little slick and gritty. So you don't need much to put in that mold. And basically you're seasoning the mold. And I'm gonna put it in everything. Some of mine, these have actually already been seasoned. And you can determine whether you need to season it once every 3 or 4 uses. But you'll know, because if your clay sticks to it, then you need to add a little bit of cornstarch. So you can see there's actually way more than I need in there. Okay, but what I'm going to just do is just turn it over and get rid of any excess that's in there. So you can see you just need a light dusting. And most of the time I didn't have one handy, but most of the time I just use a little brush to put it in there. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to grab the IOD paper clay. So the paper clay is artist quality. It is really I love it so much. I've tried many other clays. This one I find works the best. Now people also will use other products in the molds. It is food safe, like I mentioned earlier, so you can put candy in there if you're baking something. I've seen some really awesome ideas that people have used, but paper clay is what we're using today. Paper clay will dry out, so I highly recommend that you have a plastic bag handy so that when you're working with your mold, you will just place it in here and kind of secure it. The paper clay is air dry, so it dries quickly. So I'm going to manipulate my clay so that all the crinkles and creases that you see in here, not all of them will be gone, but as many as possible will be gone, so that when I put it into the mold, it's as solid of a piece of clay that I can get. All right, so I've gotten most of the creases and breaks in it taken care of. So I'm going to place it into my mold, and I'm pushing down and filling all of the spaces with the paper clay. So you can see, even though I didn't have a ton, it is more than enough for the mold that I'm using. So a lot of people do different things. Some people will use a rolling pin to mold it into the, to press it into the mold as much as they can. I typically just use my hands. Also, people will use a a spackle knife that can just take and slide it across here to release any of the excess clay that is there. Again, typically I just use my fingers. What's great is that you can feel that edge that's right here. If you guys can hopefully see that little edge, that's what allows you to release the clay and have a really smooth line and finish. So I'm just pressing in and trying to get it as even as I can all the way across the back, because obviously this is going to be put onto your pot. So you want to have as level the surface on that piece as you can. But if it's not perfect, that's okay too, because it's glued on there and we are going to eventually paint over that also. Okay, so I'm finishing pressing and releasing any of the excess paper clay out of my mold, and I'm just going to kind of firmly press down and smooth it around a little bit here. If I have any uneven, I'm going to try to, any uneven surfaces, I'm going to try to smooth that out. So this looks pretty good. All right, so I've released the excess clay. I'm going to move that to the side for you guys. So you see there, it's got a nice smooth finish to it, and that's not as important as pressing down, and the pressing down will give you all of the details of the mold. All right, so I'm just going to bend that back and easily remove it. I'm going to try to avoid, and that came out really easy, I was going to avoid putting any pressure on the top part as I released it so that the detail will stay there. There we go. We went ahead and finished creating the molds that we're going to place onto our custom flower pot here. So the one tip that I wanted to give you is, when we have small details like the top of this crown here, you want to make sure that you actually have it one piece of clay. If you put two pieces of clay in here, it's much more likely to break at the smallest area. So you want to make sure it's just one solid piece of clay that you're putting into the mold. The other thing that you want to make sure is that when you're doing it, that you check your areas. Like we started this and there was just a little area here that did not have clay pushed all the way down into it. So you just want to make sure that you're creating your edges as smoothly and filled with the clay. Now, you're saying, well, why are you leaving those in there? You can leave your paper clay in the mold for a little while if you want to, because as it starts to dry, it's actually easier to release also. And it tends to dry first around the edges, which helps it keep its form a little bit better, which then allows some of the smaller detailed items to more easily come out in one piece. So we're just gonna set this to the side for a little bit, get rid of some of our extra clay that's here. And I'm just gonna grab it. This is, believe it or not, it's dried. We didn't use the hair dryer or anything. So it's kind of dry, but what I wanna show you is, again, how we're gonna place these molds on here. So this one might be a little large for this piece. So we're just gonna take a look at it. We're gonna say, okay, so I'm gonna take my second piece and I'm also gonna wrap that around here. But how do I wanna manipulate this? Maybe I wanna go ahead and take it all the way to the edge like this. What's great about our paper clay is, even though it came in a shape like this, we can manipulate it to be a different shape, okay? So we're gonna kind of show you that in a little bit. Okay, we've created our molds, and now I'm going back to the custom flower pot, and we're gonna add a little bit more texture to this. So I'm looking at mine, and I'm like, it's very light, but I think I'm just gonna go ahead and start creating the base of where you would see water lines. So the way that you will do that is you're gonna take, and you're gonna just, I'm gonna use only the bayberry right now, and I'm just gonna kind of go up and down here. Like, you know, water, when it does, it's a little uneven. So I'm just gonna take and put it around the bottom a little bit. So the technique that I'm using here would be called stippling. In other words, you're just using the top bristles and you're just creating a line that will allow some of what's already there to show through. I don't want that solid line. So I'm also gonna create a line here, maybe put a little bit on the edges here, but I'm just gonna go around. Now you don't have to go around the entire pot. Again, it's just something that you kind of decide what you like. Now for this, I'm like, okay, I like that. I like the way it's looking. This got a little thick, so I'm gonna just lighten that up a little bit. And then I'm gonna come back. Now I'm gonna kind of take as much of that paint off of my brush as I can. You can use your paper plate. I'm gonna use this little paper that I have down, and I'm gonna take a little bit of white. And I don't want a lot, so I'm going to what they call lay off the paint. So I'm just gonna take and get rid of some of that so that I just have a little bit. And I'm gonna come back into some of the areas that I've just stippled and create a little bit of lightness to it there. Okay, so our pot is painted and we have, I think, a technique that I love, and we are ready to glue the molds on. So I have the molds here in front of you that have been pulled out, and I'm just gonna take my glue and I'm gonna take the glue and I'm going to just put, I don't need a ton on there because I don't want it oozing everywhere, but I get to use my finger and I want to evenly spread this onto my edges. So I've got this going here. Now I'm going to just kind of put it where I think the best place is. And, okay, so I'm going to frame the crown. And I really love the texture of this. And so I'm gonna mold this paper clay mold to the piece, okay? So now you can use like a blue painter's tape to hold it on, but this is Tite Bond. It's super quick, it dries really fast and gives you great hold. So again, I'm just kind of putting that on there, and I think that looks pretty good. So we'll do the second one and place the crown in the middle of it. All right, so we've placed the last pieces in place, and you guys are ready. I don't even have to tape this part of it. It is nice and secure on there. So the last thing that we're gonna do then is we're gonna go back over, again using the paint, we're going to paint the molds to kind of match into our pot. Okay, so now we have our molds glued to our custom flower pot, and I'm just gonna take and I'm gonna start painting those. And again, you can paint while they're still wet, and you want to make sure you get up into all these little creases. And that's what's great about using a brush like this with the softer bristles, is you're not going to damage your molds and the design that's already on them. So again, I'm kind of using the stipple technique. I'm kind of mixing my two paint colors. I've got a little darker up here and a little lighter down here. Again, it's just however you decide you want to paint it. Nothing is wrong. Whatever you do, your creativity, let it shine through. So we now have the molds painted and they match the actual custom pot and colors that we did. So it's kind of fun. I haven't used a mold like this on a flower pot yet, so I kind of love to see the difference that we do, different things that we do. So the last thing that you want to do is you want to paint the bottom of your pot. You can turn it over, let it dry, and then paint the inside of your pot. But the reason I didn't go ahead and paint the inside of my pot while I was doing the outside is it allowed me to have somewhere to hold without having my paint all over my hands, although it's already there. So that will be the remaining steps for your flower pot. And now, one thing I did want to talk about is you can see that we used very little paint for this entire project with many layers. So that's what's so great. Fusion mineral paint and these little testers is going to be more than enough for your project. You'll have leftovers in most instances. So the fusion mineral paint goes really far, and we just love using it for these projects. So have fun. So here's our finished product for our first tutorial, and with the IOD molds. So this is our custom flower pot with Orchid design molds. So we really think that that turned out well. It is going to be, for the kit, is going to be online. It is $62 and you can find that under the workshop tabs at dresserupvintage.com. We are also going to have a tutorial on the wood flowers and how to dye those on our YouTube page. That YouTube page is going to be Wendy's Workshop. This is Wendy's Workshop for Dresser Up Vintage Boutique and Restoration. And remember, everyone is unique, so make it yours. Hi, if you're looking for a more personal hands-on experience with our DIY kit, you can come to our Newport location and we are going to have in-person workshops on the 10th of this month and the 24th. And we will be offering those on a monthly basis with each DIY kit. So if you're looking for more information, please go to dresserupvintage.com. You can look at under the workshops tabs and see what we're offering for the DIY kit.